In the world of Percy Jackson, there are many characters who died in the name of sacrifice. All these deaths motivated the title character, Percy Jackson, in the quest surrounding the Great Prophecy, the prophecy of the child of the eldest gods, who will be the reason why Olympus rose or raised. But I cannot talk about sacrifice without discussing the most important sacrifice of all, Selena Beauregard. She's such a minor character, but she's also so important because Selena is part of the equation as to why Percy fights so hard in the Battle of Manhattan during the Second Titan War, and she's also part of what drives her half-sister, Piper McLean, throughout her journey in The Lost Hero. In this video, I'm going to explain why Selena's death is so important, and why and how it was so meaningful, giving her a proper send-off as she took her last breath. Before we begin though, I'd like to take a moment to promote my Instagram, which I am trying to use as a way to grow my subscriber base on the platform. So be sure to follow me on there to get a glimpse at some of the things that I do in my personal time, as well as the other projects I'm working on. Now, let's get started. Selena Beauregard's death takes place within the pages of The Last Olympian, specifically in the chapter titled, I Sit on the Hot Seat. But the events that lead up to her death take place in We Get Help from a Thief. It happens in the middle of the Battle of Manhattan, and already in this book, which begins in media res, the middle of the action, so much has happened. Percy has witnessed a tragedy right at the beginning of the book, when Charles Beckendorf has sacrificed his life for him on Luke Castellan's cruise ship, the Princess Andromeda. And it isn't like Percy hasn't faced tragedy and death before. He watched his mother get crushed by the Minotaur, saw Zoe Nightshade die at the hands of her own father, Atlas, witnessed countless others die during the Battle of the Labyrinth. But Beckendorf's sacrifice and death is so specific because it ties so closely with Selena's sacrifice. Until this book, Charles Beckendorf and Selena Beauregard were considered minor characters. They were never some of the main characters to appear consistently alongside Luke, Annabeth, Grover, and Percy. But here, this is the book that changes that. When Beckendorf looks at a photograph of himself and Selena, because Percy tells us that they'd just gotten their crap together and admitted to each other how they felt, and that at this point, they are now dating. So when Beckendorf stays behind on the cruise ship and hits the control to the detonator on his wristwatch, he's looking into Percy's eyes, knowing that his end is now and Percy is forced to flee, whereas Beckendorf dies in the explosion. And when Percy comes back to camp to bring the bad news that they lost yet another camper to this war, Connor Stoll puts two and two together and says that when Selena hears this, she will not like this one bit. Selena comes running up to them, asking where Charlie is, and when she really looks at Percy, her expression is said to shatter, and she falls silent, unable to speak, as she begins to cry from the shock of losing her boyfriend. Losing her boyfriend, in combination of being guilty of being Luke's mole within the camp, breaks Selena completely, to the point where almost the entire book she is seen crying as she comes to the realization that Luke, who blackmailed her and emotionally abused her into being his mole, has lied to her, his lie being that if Selena fulfilled her duties as his spy, no harm would come to Beckendorf, which means Selena this entire time has essentially been Luke's spy in vain. It culminated to nothing but heartbreak for her. And Selena being so heartbroken is part of what drives Percy in his desire to stop Kronos, because already at this point, they have lost so many campers, and he doesn't desire to lose any more people, except with the war coming to New York, more losses will compound, and he needs to make sure that those losses aren't for nothing. It is in the middle of the Battle of Manhattan, specifically during Chapter 12 titled Rachel Makes a Bad Deal, that we get a little more development of Selena's character. This adds so much depth to her character arc in just a few paragraphs, where she is caring for Annabeth in the Plaza Hotel after Annabeth gets injured by a poisoned dagger, which she takes for Percy. Selena tells Percy that she is the most useless of all the campers, that she isn't any good at any of the activities, and that she is simply holding everyone else down by barely contributing during the battle. In the paragraph that follows this piece of dialogue, Percy recounts that she reminds him of glass, how she'll break it any minute. Seeing Selena so heartbroken makes Percy angry about Beckendorf's death all over again, and he goes on to say that if he finds out who is the spy for Luke, he would personally feed them to his hellhound, Mrs. O'Leary, as a chew toy, showing how much Percy has grown to care for Selena like a brother. But Percy is quick to comfort her, telling her, "You're a great camper. You're the best Pegasus rider we have, and you get along with people. Believe me, anyone who can make friends with Clarice has talent." This piece of dialogue causes Selena to light up, and she says that she plans on going back to camp and persuading Clarice to join the battle. However, what she fails to mention is that she knows she cannot convince Clarice, so she takes a completely different approach. She steals Clarice's armor and disguises herself, and brings the entire Ares cabin to Manhattan, where she proceeds to lead the charge against the Draken. It goes as follows. Through her war helmet, I could only see her eyes, but I could tell something was wrong. Her blue eyes shone with fear. Clarice never looked like that, and she didn't have blue eyes. "Ares!" she shouted in that strangely shrill voice. She leveled her spear and charged the Draken. "No," I muttered. "Wait!" But the monster looked down at her, almost in contempt, and spit poison directly in her face. She screamed and fell. "Clarice!" Annabeth jumped off the monster's back and ran to help, while the other Ares campers tried to defend their fallen counselor. I drove Riptide between two of the creature's scales and managed to turn its attention on me. I got thrown, but I landed on my feet. "Come on, you stupid worm! Look at me!" For the next several minutes, all I saw were teeth. I retreated and dodged poison, but I couldn't hurt the thing. At the edge of my vision, I saw a flying chariot land on 5th Avenue. Then someone ran toward us. A girl's voice, shaken with grief, cried, "No! Curse you! Why?" I dared to glance over, but what I saw made no sense. Clarice was lying on the ground where she'd fallen, her armor smoked with poison. Annabeth and the Ares campers were trying to unfasten her helmet, and kneeling next to them, her face blotchy with tears, was a girl in camp clothes. It was Clarice. My head spun. Why hadn't I noticed before? The girl in Clarice's armor was much thinner, not as tall, but why would someone pretend to be Clarice? I was so stunned, the Draken almost snapped me in half. I dodged, and the beast buried its head in a brick wall. "Why?" the real Clarice demanded, holding the other girl in her arms, while the other campers struggled to remove the poison-corroded helmet. Chris Rodriguez ran over from the flying chariot. He and Clarice must have ridden it here from camp, chasing the Ares campers, who'd mistakenly been following the other girl, thinking she was Clarice, but it still made no sense. The Draken tugged its head from the brick wall and screamed in rage. "Look out!" Chris warned. Instead of turning toward me, the Draken whirled toward the sound of Chris's voice. It bared its fangs at the group of demigods. The real Clarice looked up at the Draken, her face filled with absolute hate. I'd seen a look that intense only once before. Her father, Ares, had worn the same expression when I'd fought him in single combat. "You want death?" Clarice screamed at the Draken. "Well, come on!" She grabbed her spear from the fallen girl. With no armor or shield, she charged the Draken. I tried to close the distance to help, but Clarice was faster. She leaped aside as the monster struck, pulverizing the ground in front of her. Then she jumped onto the creature's head. As it reared up, she drove her electric spear into its good eye with so much force it shattered the shaft, releasing all of the magic weapon's power. Electricity arced across the creature's head, causing its whole body to shudder. Clarice jumped free, rolling safely to the sidewalk as smoke boiled from the Draken's mouth. The Draken's flesh dissolved, and it collapsed into a hollow, scaly tunnel of armor. The rest of us stared at Clarice in awe. I had never seen anyone take down such a huge monster single-handedly, but Clarice didn't seem to care. She ran back to the wounded girl who'd stolen her armor. Finally, Annabeth managed to remove the girl's helmet. We all gathered around. The Ares campers, Chris, Clarice, Annabeth, and me. The battle still raged along Fifth Avenue, but for that moment, nothing existed except our small circle and the fallen girl. Her features, once beautiful, were badly burned from poison. I could tell that no amount of nectar or ambrosia would save her. Something is about to happen. Rachel's words rang in my ears. A trick that ends in death. Now I knew what she meant, and I knew who had led the Ares cabin into battle. I looked down at the dying face of Selena Beauregard. This description of Selena's moment in battle leading up to her death is one of the most beautiful, powerful descriptions I'd ever read anywhere. There she was, just a few chapters ago, doubting her place at camp, doubting that she is any good, hating herself for being Luke's mole, and now she is leading a charge into battle to fight a monster that only a child of Ares is destined to kill. And in her dying breath, Selena reveals herself to have been the spy of Kronos all along. It says the following. Selena opened her hand. In her palm was a silver bracelet with a scythe charm, the mark of Kronos. A cold fist closed around my heart. You were the spy. Selena tried to nod. Before I liked Charlie. Luke was nice to me. He was so charming, handsome. Later, I wanted to stop helping him, but he threatened to tell. He promised I was saving lives. Fewer people would get hurt. He told me he wouldn't hurt Charlie. He lied to me. I met Annabeth's eyes. Her face was chalky. She looked like somebody had just yanked the world out from under her feet. Behind us, the battle raged. Clarice scowled at her cabin mates. Go! Help the centaurs! Protect the doors! Go! They scrambled off to join the fight. Selena took a heavy, painful breath. Forgive me. You're not dying, Clarice insisted. Charlie! Selena's eyes were a million miles away. See? Charlie! She didn't speak again. This moment where Selena takes her final breath forever changes the course of the novel. Clarice rushes into the battle, and she receives the blessing of Ares. Selena is able to be with Beckendorf in the afterlife, and Annabeth is finally hit with the realization that Luke is far gone from being saved. Up until this moment, Annabeth has had this hope, this belief that she could somehow save Luke from himself, stop him from going along with Kronos' plans. But this whole moment proves to Annabeth that only Luke can stop himself. No one else can, not even her, and that she needs to swallow her pride and admit that Luke has consistently, consciously made all these horrible decisions and hurt so many people, including her. It isn't until Selena's death that Annabeth realizes that Luke is too far gone. She even tells Percy this whole time he's been right, and that she hopes he's happy, but to the contrary, Percy says, "That doesn't make me happy." Of course he wanted to prove to Annabeth that he's been right about Luke the whole time, but not at the price of seeing her heart broken. The death of Selena also directly influences Annabeth and Percy to start their relationship in I Am Dumped, where the two share their first real kiss in front of everyone in the camp on Percy's 16th birthday. Sure, Annabeth kissed him before in the Battle of the Labyrinth, but this is a different kiss. It's a kiss that solidifies their being together, and it parallels so beautifully with how Selena and Beckendorf's relationship started, with everyone in the camp egging them on to admit how they feel about one another, and them finally deciding to take that step. Due to it being so painstakingly obvious that Selena and Beckendorf both liked each other, and how everyone in the camp just knew Percy and Annabeth liked each other. The way Selena and Beckendorf got together, and the way Percy and Annabeth get together is almost like poetry, and this is why Selena's death leaves behind such an impact on not just this novel, but the novel that follows after it, The Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero. Selena's death is one of the many factors that influence Piper McLean's decisions throughout The Lost Hero, culminating with Piper and Aphrodite's heart-to-heart conversation. Selena's death brings forth a whole other meaning to Piper's character arc, because by the end of the novel, she gathers up the courage to stand up for herself against Drew Tanaka, saying, "Selena Beauregard knew better than that. Aphrodite is about love and beauty, being loving, spreading beauty, good friends, good times, good deeds, not just looking good. Selena made mistakes, but in the end, she stood by her friends. That's why she was a hero." Piper declaring Selena a hero makes her sacrifice and death that much more worth it. It gives her character development, even though she's no longer visible on the page. That's Selena's legacy, and that's why her death and sacrifice is by far the most important sacrifice of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, because even though she was such a minor character, she still influenced so much, and I hope that the television show on Disney Plus does her justice. Thank you so much for watching. If you're brand new, be sure to subscribe. Also be sure to hit that like button and leave me your opinions in the comments down below. God bless, happy viewing, and have a nice day.